The mansion in Connecticut breathed wealth in every corner, yet its marble corridors carried a sound that stripped it of all grandeur. The desperate cries of newborn Michael Ferraz. His wails pierced the heavy silence, echoing off gilded mirrors and velvet curtains. The air was thick with perfume, polished wood, and something darker, grief that no fragrance could mask. Gabriel Ferraz, 32, buried himself in his office, drowning in documents and numbers, hoping work would shield him from the image of his late wife. He shut the door on the cries, on the memory of blood-stained sheets, and on the suffocating emptiness that awaited him outside the glow of his computer screen. Adriana Silva, the nanny, lounged in the living room, scrolling through her phone with painted nails tapping the screen, sipping wine as if the baby's suffering were background noise. She smirked at her reflection in the glass, adjusting her blouse for an evening outing she had already planned. The infant's gasps of exhaustion were nothing more than an annoyance she knew she could ignore. It was Lauren Nunez who froze in her tracks as she passed the nursery. Her hands, raw from scrubbing floors, tightened on the bucket she carried. The sound of Michael's cries cut through her chest like a blade, summoning the ghost of her own son, gone just 6 weeks ago. She hesitated, heart racing, before stepping into the room bathed in shadows. The sight shattered her. Michael's tiny lips cracked, his skin flushed, his body trembling with thirst. No one else seemed to notice. No one else seemed to care. Her breath caught, a decision trembling on the edge of instinct. She felt both terror and an undeniable pull. In that moment, Lauren understood the unbearable truth. If she did nothing, this child would fade into silence. Lauren lingered by the crib, the sound of Michael's shallow breaths entwining with memories she had tried to bury. Just weeks earlier, she had cradled her own infant son, whispering lullabies through nights that blurred into dawn. She remembered the weight of him, the fragile warmth, the sudden fever that stole him away before she could even scream for help. The ache remained raw, etched into her chest like a scar that refused to heal. And now, fate had placed this fragile boy in her path, a living echo of the child she had lost. Adriana's laughter drifted faintly from downstairs, indifferent and mocking. Gabriel's door remained shut, a silent monument to his retreat. Lauren's fingers brushed Michael's tiny hand, and his grip, weak but desperate, summoned both fear and longing. Was this grief manipulating her, urging her toward something forbidden? The mansion felt haunted, not by ghosts but by neglect. Marble, gold, and chandeliers masked a hollowness deeper than any poverty she had known. As she rocked Michael gently, fragments of her own past surged back. Her father's absence, her mother's toil, the endless struggle of survival. Loss had been her inheritance, love her only rebellion. She felt her milk stir, a painful reminder that her body still carried traces of a child who was gone. And as Michael whimpered against her chest, the temptation to cross an invisible boundary became almost unbearable. Something unspoken tied them, as if grief had stitched one broken heart to another. The next evening, the crisis erupted. Michael's cries had turned into hoarse whimpers, his lips nearly purple with thirst. Lauren's panic rose as she realized no one else would act. Her hands shook, but her decision was swift, instinct overtaking reason. She drew the child into her arms, pressing him to her breast, feeling a surge of pain and relief as he latched. For the first time in days, silence filled the nursery. His tiny body relaxed, his breaths deepened, and tears slid down Lauren's face as she held him close. The door creaked open. Gabriel stood frozen in the threshold, his face pale, eyes wide with disbelief. Papers slipped from his hand and scattered across the polished floor. His grief and exhaustion clashed with a raw, paternal instinct he barely recognized. The sight before him was both shocking and strangely consoling. His son, finally at peace, nourished by a woman he barely knew. "What are you doing?" His voice cracked, sharp yet uncertain. Lauren trembled, pulling the blanket around herself and the baby, shame and fear tightening her throat. She expected dismissal, rage, perhaps even humiliation. But instead, Gabriel hesitated, torn between outrage and gratitude. For the first time since his wife's death, Michael slept without pain. And Gabriel, though unsettled, could not look away. Whispers traveled faster than shadows in the affluent neighborhood. Adriana's sharp tongue carried the story beyond the mansion's gates. The cleaning woman had nursed the child as if he were her own. In hushed kitchens and manicured gardens, neighbors speculated with relish. Was it desperation, obsession, or something darker? Soon, Gabriel was met with sidelong glances and veiled questions at his office, insinuations dripping like poison into his already fractured world. Inside the mansion, tension grew unbearable. Gabriel avoided Lauren, his gratitude curdled by unease. Adriana played her part with feigned innocence, offering sly remarks that deepened Gabriel's doubts. Lauren, on edge, worked in silence, her heart split between the terror of losing her position and the bond that had formed with Michael. Each cry of the baby drew her near despite the invisible walls tightening around her. The household, once filled with cold neglect, had become a stage of hidden battles. Gabriel wrestled with himself. Was he complicit in madness by allowing this bond? Lauren feared every knock on the door would be her dismissal. And in the shadows of gossip, Adriana smiled, watching as suspicion took root. The act that had saved Michael's life was transforming into a scandal threatening to consume them all. The mansion became an arena of unspoken wars. Gabriel walked its corridors with a storm cloud on his shoulders, his gaze wary when it landed on Lauren. Yet Michael's health betrayed the truth. He calmed only in her presence, his small hands clutching at her as if she were the only anchor in a sea of neglect. This undeniable bond unsettled Gabriel, for it revealed both his failure as a father and the silent devotion of the woman who scrubbed his floors. Adriana seized every opportunity to twist the knife. "It's unnatural," she whispered one evening, her voice dripping with false concern. "She behaves as though Michael belongs to her." Her eyes glittered with cruelty as she added, "People are talking, Gabriel. Imagine what they will think of you." Doubt coiled inside him, even as he recalled the peace on his son's face when nestled against Lauren. Lauren, meanwhile, carried on with quiet resolve. She never sought to replace a mother. She sought only to soothe a child abandoned by comfort. Yet in the hushed hours, when Michael's breath warmed her chest, she could not deny the stirring ache of love, a love too dangerous to admit. She found solace in brief exchanges with the cook and gardener, who noticed her devotion and pitied her plight. Allies in silence, they whispered hope when others sowed suspicion. But the lines were drawn, and loyalties would soon be tested. One afternoon, a careless word revealed the depth of Adriana's deceit. Lauren overheard her on the phone, bragging about selling items from the house, small valuables Gabriel had not yet missed. Worse still, Adriana mentioned pocketing money meant for Michael's medication, dismissing the infant's needs with a callous laugh. Lauren's blood ran cold. The pieces began to align. Michael's fevers, his weakness, the way Adriana shrugged off his cries. Should she speak? Confront Gabriel? The thought of his scorn silenced her. She was already under suspicion, her position precarious. A single wrong step would end her livelihood. Yet as she stood hidden in the hallway, trembling, she realized that silence could condemn Michael further. Her secret bond with him had already turned into whispered scandal. Why not add another truth to the storm? That night, she lingered by Gabriel's study door, ready to knock, but froze when she heard voices within. A neighbor had come, warning him again about her supposed obsession. The venomous rumor was spreading, rooting itself deeper. Gabriel's sigh carried the weight of surrender. Perhaps it is best if she goes," he muttered. Lauren stumbled away, her revelation buried in her throat, the walls closing in tighter. The secret she carried could save the child, but the lies told by others threatened to destroy her first. The decision came swiftly, without ceremony. Gabriel summoned Lauren to the grand hall, his face unreadable beneath the chandelier's glow. Adriana stood nearby, her smirk barely concealed. The words cut sharper than a blade. "Your services are no longer required." Lauren's world shattered in an instant. Her pleas remained trapped in her chest as Michael wailed from upstairs, the sound stabbing her heart with every note. "No references will be given," Gabriel added, the sentence sealing her fate. In his eyes lingered conflict, regret perhaps, but not enough to halt the execution of his choice. Lauren gathered her few belongings in silence, her steps echoing with finality as she left the mansion's golden prison. The winter air outside struck her like a cruel hand. With nowhere to go, she drifted into the night, her grief and hunger her only companions. As days blurred into weeks, Lauren's strength waned, her body beaten by cold and deprivation. She collapsed beneath bridges, coughed through fever, and whispered prayers to a god who seemed deaf to her cries. Back at the mansion, Michael's decline began. He refused bottles, rejected the arms of new caretakers, his body weakening with each passing day. His silence, once longed for, became terrifying. And Gabriel, tormented by guilt and confusion, could not ignore the truth much longer. He had severed his son from the only source of comfort that had ever truly reached him. Michael's cries, once so piercing, faded into fragile murmurs that chilled the air of the mansion. Nurses came and went, each baffled by his refusal to eat. Bottles of formula lined the counter untouched, pacifiers discarded like useless relics. His tiny body grew thinner, his eyes duller, his breath shallow. The once grand home now echoed with a dreadful quiet, broken only by occasional sobs that resembled the sound of something breaking forever. Gabriel paced the halls, his polished shoes striking the marble like the tolling of a bell. He tried to bury himself in contracts, meetings, anything that might distract him. But each time he entered the nursery, guilt sank its claws deeper. The crib was a prison, and his son, a captive fading before his eyes. Adriana, ever callous, insisted it was just a phase. Yet doubt now gnawed at Gabriel. Doubt about her words, about his choices, about himself. Meanwhile, Lauren lay beneath a shelter downtown, her body ravaged by fever. Hunger twisted her insides, cold gnawed her skin, but in her dreams Michael appeared, crying, reaching, calling for her. She woke with tears frozen to her face, her arms aching for a child no longer in her grasp. The bond remained, unbroken by distance or cruelty, binding her fate to his as tightly as blood. The illusion shattered when Gabriel discovered the missing medicine. He had gone searching through cabinets, desperate for answers, only to find receipts altered, doses gone. Rage rose in his throat, and when he confronted Adriana, her smirk betrayed her before her lips moved. She faltered, denied, then finally snapped. Why care so much now? The brat will cry no matter what. The revelation struck him like a blade. Not only had she stolen, she had endangered the very life he was sworn to protect. Memories flooded back, Lauren at Michael's side, her patience, her instinct, her quiet sacrifice. Shame poured through him, suffocating, as he realized how easily he had been manipulated. Adriana's gossip had poisoned his judgment, and he had cast away the only person who had truly saved his son. Michael's condition worsened rapidly. The doctor spoke grimly, dehydration, malnutrition, and a will to live slipping away. He needs more than treatment, the doctor said softly. He needs comfort. A bond. Gabriel felt the walls close in. He had betrayed both child and savior, and now both were lost. Unless he acted, the grave silence waiting for his son would mirror the silence of his wife's tomb. He knew then, he had to find Lauren, no matter the cost. The search began with urgency bordering on madness. Gabriel abandoned boardrooms and contracts, driving through icy streets, visiting shelters, hospitals, even dark alleys where shadows swallowed the forgotten. Each face he passed carried the weight of desperation, but none were hers. The image of Lauren's haunted eyes, her trembling hands cradling his son, drove him forward like a curse. At last, in a clinic that smelled of bleach and despair, he found her. Lauren sat slumped on a cot, her cheeks hollow, her lips cracked from fever. She looked less like the woman he remembered and more like a ghost stitched together by pain. For a moment he faltered, shame rooting him to the floor. But Michael's frail cries haunted his ears, and he forced himself to speak. "Lauren, he needs you." His voice broke, stripped of pride. "Michael is dying." Her eyes opened, glassy with distrust. She coughed, a sound heavy with exhaustion. "You threw me into the streets, Gabriel, and now you come with this." Her bitterness was sharp, but beneath it lay fear. Fear that she might believe him. Fear that her heart would betray her once more. Gabriel fell to his knees beside her bed, hands trembling. "Not for me. For him. Please." The battle lines were drawn, not between enemies, but within broken souls. The coming confrontation would decide not only Michael's fate, but the fragile hope of redemption for them all. The hospital room was steeped in a silence so heavy it felt sacred. Machines hummed, monitors beeped, and in the crib lay Michael, his skin pale as porcelain, his chest rising with fragile effort. Gabriel stood at the foot of the bed, helpless, his hands clenched white around the rail. Doctors and nurses whispered in corners, their words laced with resignation. They could keep the child alive, but they could not give him the will to fight. Lauren, still weak, stepped hesitantly into the room. Her frame trembled beneath borrowed clothes, her eyes sunken, yet burning with a fire that defied her frailty. Gabriel moved to steady her, but she shook him off, her focus fixed entirely on the baby. Each step toward the crib was like crossing a battlefield, every memory of rejection pressing down on her. Yet when she looked at Michael, all hesitation dissolved. She reached for him, and the nurse hesitated only a moment before placing the boy in her arms. At first he lay limp, barely stirring. Then, slowly, as her warmth enveloped him, a change rippled through his tiny body. He opened his eyes, faint but alive, and let out a weak whimper before nestling into her chest. Tears blurred Lauren's vision. Michael's lips searched instinctively, and she offered him the nourishment she thought she had lost. Relief surged through the room as his cries softened into a rhythm of acceptance. It was not medicine that revived him, but love, the bond that had never broken. Gabriel watched, his face wet with tears, as the truth settled over him. Without Lauren, there was no hope. Without her, Michael had no mother, no chance, no life. The weeks that followed reshaped everything. Lauren, now restored by care and purpose, moved back into the mansion not as a servant but as Michael's guardian. Her posture was different, no longer timid, no longer invisible. She demanded respect, and Gabriel, humbled, granted it freely. He dismissed Adriana with finality, his words carrying the weight of both rage and regret. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip, but Gabriel silenced them by speaking the truth openly. Lauren had saved his son, while others had failed him. Michael thrived. His cheeks regained color, his laughter filled the once empty halls, and his first word, "Mama," sealed what had always been true. Legal battles followed, but Gabriel's wealth and influence now served justice instead of vanity. In time, Lauren was granted adoption rights, her name inked alongside Michael's in permanence. Gabriel, once lost in grief, learned to walk a new path. He no longer buried himself in ledgers and meetings, but in bedtime stories and morning walks with his son. With Lauren, their relationship grew not from romance, but from a deeper, steadier truth. Partnership forged through pain, trust, and redemption. On a quiet spring morning, sunlight spilled across the mansion's garden. Michael toddled toward Lauren, his small voice ringing with joy as he called her name again. She knelt, arms open, heart full, knowing the broken pieces of her past had found meaning. They were not a perfect family, but they were a real one, born of loss, healed by love, and bound together forever. If you made it this far, leave us a comment telling us where you're watching from today and what you thought of the story. If you can, share this video with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to receive new videos. A big hug, and see you tomorrow.